This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, by way of introduction to the Kinnus, very briefly, there are 45 Kinnus that we say on Tisha B'Av. I always like to think 45, Begematria Adam, indicating that it is our entities that we are mourning. It is we who are not whole. The Torah writes in Siman Tav Kuf Nun Tes, regarding the recitation of Kinnus, the entire congregation needs to understand them. Men, women, and children. So for the sake of greater understanding and to enhance the meaning of our Tisha B'Av service, we're going to be selecting specific Kinnus to focus on, paying attention to historical background and some of the key phrases. We should know, though, that even if you don't understand the meaning of the words themselves carry tremendous Kedusha. Perhaps the most well-known of all the Paitanim, Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir, who is universally accepted as the father of the Paitanim. He's the author of the first 15 Kinnus, as well as many of the other tefillos that we say throughout the year. The Shibbolei Haleket writes that he heard from his father, who heard from his teachers, that when Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir composed the piyut about the heavenly angels, a fire came down from Shamayim and encircled him. Mari Hertz writes that when Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir composed the Kinnus, he uttered the name of God. Don't try this at home. He ascended to the heavens. He asked the Malach Michael how to compose Kinnus. Michael taught him how to compose by the order of the Aleph Beis, and he learned to compose his piyutim in this format. Who is Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir? There's a machlekes. I want to share with you a thought I had last night. Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir, Toysus and Chagiga Daf Yud Gimel says Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir is the son of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Eliezer Bar Shimon. However, the Rashba writes in his Tshuva Siman Tav Samach Tes that Rabbi Eliezer HaKalir is Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach. Who's Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach? The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, if you take Eliezer ben Arach and you put him on one side of the scale, and you put all the sages on the other side of the scale, he would outweigh everybody. But do you remember the Gemara in Shabbos? I believe Kuf Mem Ches. The Gemara in Shabbos says Eliezer ben Arach went on vacation, and he went to certain streams, and he drank certain wine, and he became so immersed in the physicality of this world that it seems like he forgot a pasuk in Chumash. He read HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem as Hacharesh Haya Libam. I would humbly suggest, according to the Rashba, that if the Kinnus were composed by Eliezer ben Arach, this was something that was very meaningful to him personally. What is the main objective of the Kinnah? What is the main call of the Kinnah? Hashivenu Hashem Eilecha V'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Even though Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach lost his level completely, where he forgot a pasuk in Chumash, if you look in the Gemara in Chagiga, we find that Eliezer ben Arach elevated himself to understand even the Maisa Merkava from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So his life personified that even if you fall into utter despair, you could still reach the Madrega of Hashivenu Hashem Eilecha V'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. And as an expression of that, perhaps Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach wrote the Kinnah. We begin with Kinnah Vav. Just so we're going to focus on, highlight a few phrases, and then we'll begin saying the Kinnus. Kinnah Vav Shavas. Shavas means everything came to a standstill. Everything stopped, suddenly, unexpectedly. You know, sometimes in life, people have an intuition that disaster is coming, and psychologically, that helps a person brace for the tragedy. But when tragedy happens suddenly, unexpectedly, it's almost impossible to assimilate it, to understand it, to grasp it. The tragedy of the Churban was not only that it happened, but it happened suddenly. The day before, the Avodah was being performed. Yirmiyah saw the column of smoke rising up from the Mizbeach. And the next day, it was gone. Suddenly, without any warning. If you look on the 8th line of the Kinnah, Eini chiksa lechazayin ben Berechia. Our eye looks longingly to the vision of Zechariah ben Berechia. This refers to the prophecy of Zechariah, Id Yeshvu Zekenim Uzekenais B'Chayves Yerushalayim. The day will come where old men and old women will sit in the streets of Jerusalem. Each man with his staff in his hand from old age. The streets filled with boys and girls playing. So that's what we say, Eini chiksa lechazoin ben berachia. Every year we always focus on this line, the 13th line. We say, Al Pnei Paras, Nuptsu Chasidat, the Euphrates River, her pious ones were mutilated. This refers to when the Jewish people were being led by Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar tells the well-known Leviim, who would sing in the temple, Shiru lanu mishir tzion, serenade us as we gloat over our victory. And what did the Leviim say? Eich nashir ashir Hashem al admas nechar. Not we will not sing, but how could we sing? Because Chazal tell us that they literally bit off their thumbs, they mutilated their thumbs, and they were not able to sing Shira. And we like to say over every year, Tosfos in Yevamos Daf Pevav. Tosfos asks, when Ezra's returning in the Bayesheni, so the Jews of Worms didn't want to come back, and the Jews of Spain didn't want to come back. So he asked, can I have a few good Leviim? And the pasuk says, "Umin b'nei Levi lo matzasi sham." There were no Leviim. So what did Ezra do? He penalized the Leviim. From now on, Leviim no longer get Meiser. It goes to the Kohen. So Tosfos asks, how could it be there were no Leviim? Every shul has very, very wonderful Leviim. Leviim are some of the most special people. How could there not be any Leviim? Says Tosfos, there were Leviim, but all the Leviim that came back were the old Leviim who bit off their thumbs and couldn't play. So, but none of the new Leviim, none of the young Leviim wanted to come back. So since no young Leviim wanted to come back, Ezra penalized them. So the question is, here the Leviim, they bite off their thumbs and they're rewarded that they lose Meiser? What kind of reward is this? Says Reb Chaim Zaychik, the Leviim made an error for biting off their thumbs. If they bit off their thumbs, that means they believed they would never return to Yerushalayim. They gave up hope, and a Jew never gives up hope. I would offer, because they bit off their thumbs and they gave up hope, their children had no connection anymore. Their children thought they would never return. So in their minds, there was no point in coming back. But a Jew never gives up hope. Afilu cherev chada munachas al tzavore shel adam al yimna atzmai min harachamim. Kina vav shavas. Kina tezayin zechar asher asa tsar b'fnim. This kina, written by Rabbi Glatstein HaKalir, speaks about the unspeakable acts that the wicked Titus perpetrated when he entered the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Titus was a Roman general, of course, who destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. The siege was begun by Aspasionis Caesar Vespasian, and when Vespasian was appointed the emperor of Rome, Vespasian appointed his son Titus. The Gemara in Gittin on Daf Nun Vav Amud Beis relates that Titus began his assault on Yerushalayim with an arrogant declaration not only against the Jewish people but against God himself. Where is their God? Titus was unparalleled in his defiance against Ribbon Shalom. In fact, Avis Rab Nosson relates that when Titus entered the Beis HaMikdash, he pounds on the Mizbeach, he says, Lucas, Lucas, you're a king, I'm a king. Come, let's do war. The Gemara in Gittin says Titus grabs the Zoina, he takes her into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and on a Sefer Torah, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he commits the unspeakable Avera. He proceeded to take his sword and he slashed the Paroiches, and Hashem made a miracle that blood began to gush forth from the Paroiches. Titus thought Haragas Atzmai, that he's slain Kaviyachal HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he takes the Paroiches, he uses it, and he makes a bundle and carries away all the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash. By account of Josephus, 97,000 Jews were taken captive, and the death toll by the sword or starvation was 1.1 million Jews. The Romans minted a special coin for the occasion. Before Tisha B'Av, I received many emails of people who have this coin, saw the coin, heard about the coin. On one side of the coin, I think I have the coin here. A picture, at least. Here it is. On one side of the coin, is a picture of a Roman soldier garlanded in a victory wreath, and on the other side is a defeated Jew bent over, leaning on his under a palm tree, and the inscription reads, Judea capta, which means Judea is kaput. Judaism is finished. Judah is finished. One of the most dramatic scenes in Imperial Rome is the Arch of Titus that has been erected, and engraved scenes of Titus carrying out the kelim of the Beis HaMikdash. In the Kinnus we read, Zechar asher asat sar b'fnim. Remember what the tormentor did in the Beis HaMikdash. Shalaf charboi uba lifnai v'lifnim. He unleashed his sword and went into the innermost chamber. Nachlasenu bies ketime lechem hapanim. He struck terror throughout our land as he defiled the showbread. V'gadar paroiches ba'alas shtei panim. He pierced the curtain. The Mekoinen then laments the irony that when Aaron HaKohen, when his sons Nadav Avihu brought a strange fire into the Mishkan, these tzaddikim were punished instantaneously. A fire bolted out from the Kodesh HaKadoshim, entered their nostrils, consumed their innards, and yet when the evil Titus committed the most despicable act, nothing happened to him. Avoisenu Zora Kehachnisoi Bachurav Achlaish. When Nadav Avihu brought a foreign fire, they were consumed in fire. Bezeh Zoina Tsoya Hichnis V'loi Nichva Beish. And Titus brought a Zoina, and nothing happened to him. How do we understand that? The answer the Nefesh Chaim explains is that there's a difference between a Jew and a Gentile. A Jew, I'll tell you, everybody has nightmares. My nightmares are, is the live stream going to be plugged in? Is it? Yeah, we're good? I want to thank Rachamim Segev of Torah Anytime for setting up this elaborate technical display. I want to thank Rabbi Pinchas Lipsky also for his assistance. But if you're not plugged in, it doesn't work. Sometimes you have a gadget and you say that, do I have it right? Did I put on the right settings? Did I tune it to the right? And you just didn't plug it in. If you don't plug it in, it doesn't do anything. A Jew is plugged into the system. We're plugged into the universe. So our actions and our thoughts have ramifications in this world. A Gentile, he ain't plugged in. He's not plugged into the system. So his actions do not have an effect. But there is retribution in this world. Josephus writes that at the end of Titus's life, even though he started off as a very cruel barbarian, he became very calm at the end of his life. So Rav Miller says, when a mosquito enters one's brain and pecks away all cerebral matter, it could calm a person down. So there is retribution in this world. Actually, we're speaking about Portugal. Last week we stood in Lisbon in front of a church where there's a monument where there was a terrible pogrom in 1506. What happened? A Christian said, look at the statue of Yeshu, it's glowing! So a converso next to him said, come on, it's the sun shining, it's the sun's reflection. He gave up his cover. They killed him and had a big pogrom in the city. 1506. In 1755, what Chazal say, Hashem is marich apei v'gavei dilei. Hashem is patient, but He always collects. 1755. November 1st, All Saints' Day, the holiest day of the year. 9:30 a.m., the entire city of Lisbon was in Mass. What happened? The greatest earthquake in the history of Europe shook Portugal and the entire European continent. It leveled 85% of the infrastructure of Lisbon, destroying almost every church in the city, including the entire city who were in the churches at that time. Whatever survivors there were, they're running down to the lowland. Because of the earthquake, the river dried up. They're running in the riverbed. All of a sudden, one of the greatest tsunamis in the history of Europe washed away anyone who survived. And anyone who survived the first tsunami was washed away by the second tsunami. And anyone who survived the second tsunami, there was a third tsunami. So what is this, like the Far East? In Portugal. Now, the earthquake shook the churches. In the churches, they light candles. There are candles everywhere. Now there are wildfires, burning down anything that survived earthquake and tsunami. Look it up. 1755, November 1st. So you say, what about Spain? Did Spain ever get what it deserved? Portugal was leveled. Well, Spain basically was defeated. The Spanish Armada was defeated. It was no longer a world superpower. If the Spanish Armada had not been defeated by the British, they would have expanded the Inquisition to the New World. And we would not be here in a shul. After the Spanish Inquisition, the British defeated the Spanish Armada. And Spain has been irrelevant for many hundreds of years. But here's the ultimate revenge. The ultimate revenge, the Baal Shem Tov writes, Kel nekamois Hashem, kel nekamois Hoifia. The way the Lord of Vengeance works is, He works in mysterious ways. At the Alhambra decree, in the palace, Christopher Columbus comes to Ferdinand and Isabel. He says, I have a great idea. I'm going to expand the route of the spice trade. I'm going to discover the new world. Okay, what do you want from us? I need you to fund this. Okay, so Ferdinand and Isabella fund the discovery of the new world. We have in the records in Seville an account of a cabin boy who writes that as the Spanish exilees were leaving the port on August 2nd, Tisha B'Av, they waved goodbye to the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria that were docked there at the same port, and they headed out the very next day to discover America. So if you want to know who's responsible for us being here today as observant Jews, Ferdinand and Isabella. They paid for the discovery of America. Any yeshiva that's in this country owes a plaque to Isabella and Ferdinand. In the Lakewood Yeshiva, there should be a big plaques, and there are plaques there. I'm told there are plaques in the yeshiva. There should be a plaque in Tarvadas. Rabbi Lipsky, I want to get a plaque for King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. If not for them, you'll see what you could do. If not for them, we would not have Torah in the United States of America. So the ultimate revenge is they were trying to put an end to any Jewish continuity. Because of them, they are responsible for the greatest haven of Judaism that we've ever seen. So even though it seems like tzaddik v'raloi, the wicked get away, there's ultimately a price, and ultimately there is sweet revenge. The Kinnus concludes that every morning the Kohanim would remove the 93 vessels that were needed for that day's service, and on that morning, something ominously happened, never before. They could not locate all 93 vessels. Oirenu namek v'loy kehishkim meshares v'loy matzah tishim u'shloisha klei shares. But let's just ask one simple question. God does not perform miracles for naught. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't make miracles for nothing. Why would Hashem make a miracle that when Titus slashed the paroiches, blood would come squirting forth? I understand he was trying to trick Titus, but what was he trying to convey to the Jewish people? Says Rav Isaac Sher, God was conveying to the Jewish people a fundamental lesson. That Sion, that Yerushalayim, is our heart, is our life. Like we say, Rachem al Sion, ki hi beis chayenu. And if the Beis HaMikdash is being destroyed, then it's a dagger in the hearts of the Jewish people. It's like we're suffering cardiac arrest. That was the message of the miracle of Kina Tezayin Zechar Asher Asa Tsar Bifnim.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.